As team members comb through the wreckage, the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
Excuse me. Can I help you?
During the investigation, one of the family members was asking for a circuit board just because they somehow would link them to their loved one.
The unusual request leads to an incredible find. Ares 8250 has crashed just short of touchdown in San Andres and broken into 3 pieces. While wreckage crews transport the debris to a nearby facility for analysis, investigators wonder what role the severe weather played in the accident.
Can I show you this?
The team already knows the weather was changing quickly just before the crash, but they need to determine if the air traffic controller kept them up to date.
I updated them regularly once they were in my airspace.
San Andres, good morning. IDA 8250.
Go ahead.
We want to know how the weather is at the airport, please.
Okay, Air 8250, wind calm, visibility more than 10 kilometers, scattered clouds at 1,500 feet. There's some bad weather near the airfield, but right now there's no rain. Every time the weather changed even a bit, I told them.
Gear down.
Air 8250, there's a little drizzle over the runway.
A little what? Drizzle.
Minutes later, it turned into a full-blown storm.
Air 8250, there's now heavy rain at the airfield and visibility reduced to 5 kilometers.
Did they seem concerned about the weather?
No, they didn't sound overly concerned. I was very careful to tell them everything.
Investigators need to know if there was lightning near the 737 as it approached San Andres.
Sure looks like lightning. The timing fits.
The team studies the static wicks from the accident plane. Static wicks are located on the trailing edges of airplane wings and help discharge any buildup of static energy.
If the plane was struck by lightning, they should be melted or burned.
But they are not. Investigators can find no signs of a direct lightning hit on the aircraft surfaces.
They're clean.
The team still has a lot of unanswered questions about the weather at the time of the accident. Wind shear is a phenomenon in which the wind's direction or speed changes extremely abruptly. The team learns that just 2 minutes before the crash, as the storm built, winds near the runway were gusting. Digging further into the flight data.
So, lots of headwind, but almost no downdraft.
Investigator Julian Echeverry discovers the powerful winds were hitting the plane head-on, not from above.
Not enough to slam them to the ground.
After being delayed for more than an hour, Spanair Flight 5022 is finally getting back underway. There are 166 passengers on board, many of them looking to escape the stifling heat of Madrid in August.
Everyone was full of anticipation. Everyone wanted to be on their way.
Anna Stefanidis has come to Spain from Sweden. She is on her way to the Canary Islands to meet some friends.
Most of Europe has holidays, different summer holidays in August. I was going to Gran Canaria to meet my girlfriends. We were going to have 1 week's holiday, 4 ladies.
Spanair 5022, John Exxon 9 on runway 36 left.
Okay, here we go.
At 2:23, the MD-82 aircraft starts speeding down the runway.
100.
The captain watches their speed. They can't lift off until they reach 157 knots, takeoff speed.
V1, rotate.
An alarm warns the pilots something is going wrong.
Engine failure?
The first officer increases power, but he's losing control of the plane.
How the hell do you turn off that warning?
The plane is less than 40 feet from the ground.
I managed to think, this is my last trip. I've had a good life. I thought, now I die.
Fly the plane. Fly it.
Oh, God.
Just seconds after takeoff, Flight 5022 slams into a riverbank beside the runway. The plane, with 172 people on board, is now shattered wreckage spread over half a mile. There is still no evidence why LAM-470 flew into the ground in Namibia. The investigation moves from the field to DAAI offices in Windhoek, Namibia.
Is this the last inspection?
Looks like it.
They begin looking into the way Mozambique Airlines was maintaining the plane.
November 28th.
Day before the accident.
Everything seems to be done by the book.
The Embraer 190, purchased brand new just a year ago, has a spotless record.
Yeah, there was nothing wrong with the aircraft.
With no evidence of a mechanical problem, the team turns its attention to outside factors. They review meteorological reports from the day of the crash.
All right, Dennis, the data from Mon Weather Station is in.
Did bad weather bring down Flight 470?
Great. Why don't we start from the takeoff in Maputo?
The team scrolls through a series of satellite images spanning the duration of the flight.
Just some scattered clouds, 3,000 feet throughout the flight. Nowhere near their cruising altitude. What was the wind like?
Nothing stronger than 11 knots, so no problem there.
With both the machine and the environment ruled out, investigators have only one more avenue to pursue.
Okay, let's look into the pilot records.
Were the pilots responsible for the crash of Flight 470? Investigators consider if the pilots of LAM-470 played a role in causing the crash.
Captain Hermanio dos Santos Fernandez.
Born in Mozambique, 49 years old. Here we go.
How familiar was Captain Fernandez with the Embraer 190?
Positive rate. Gear up. Gear up.
The team scrutinizes his pilot records. Captain Fernandez was not only well-trained,
2,500 on the Embraer 190.
9,000 flight hours total.
he was a very experienced airman. Investigators have exhausted all available avenues of inquiry and come up empty.
Any news on the recorders?
Not yet, but I'll check in.
Okay.
It takes 3 days for search and rescue teams to lock onto the signal coming from the MAX 8 Lion Air Flight 610's flight data recorder. Divers recover it from a depth of 115 feet. The recorder has preserved data from the accident flight and 18 previous flights covering almost 1,800 different parameters.
Master caution goes off as soon as they leave the ground, probably because airspeed and altitude don't agree. Stick shaker activates here.
The data shows a repeat of the problem on the previous flight. Faulty readings caused by a discrepancy between the left and right angle of attack sensors.
Dari data flight data recorder yang kami dapatkan. From the FDR data we received, we learned that this plane had faulty angle of attack readings that affected both flights similarly. Dua penerbangan ini sangat mirip.
Left and right angle of attack values are off by 21 degrees for the entire flight.
Hingga kami mencurigai apakah
we suspected the new angle of attack sensor installed in Bali was either faulty or the installation process was done incorrectly.
Tidak sesuai.
On the MAX 8, the angle of attack sensor doesn't just measure the airplane's angle.
Altitude disagree.
It helps calculate precise airspeed and altitude.
That explains why airspeed and altitude disagreed throughout the whole flight.
The malfunctioning sensor on the captain's side resulted in a difference between the left and right side speed and altitude displays.
Then there's this.
The data clearly shows that for every nose-up trim input, there is a corresponding automatic nose-down trim input.
NTSB juga membawa tim dari...
The NTSB brought a representative from Boeing to help us in our investigation.
We're trying to understand these automatic inputs.
Looks like the MCAS kicked in.
What's that?
Boeing points to an obscure automated system known as MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System.
It only kicks in when these three conditions are met.
Boeing explains that MCAS only activates when it senses that the angle of attack is excessive, when the autopilot is off, and when the flaps are retracted, an extremely rare combination. Tragically, the data shows that because of the faulty maintenance on the angle of attack sensor, Flight 610 ended up meeting all three conditions.
Ini yang kemudian kita melihat bahwa
the series of problems occurred when the left angle of attack sensor was replaced in Bali.
Sensor sebelah kiri di Bali.
Investigators dig deeper into the data and discover the MCAS system had no failsafe.
The MCAS installed in the plane relied on only one sensor.
MCAS only took data from one angle of attack sensor, not both. Most protection systems are designed with redundancies, so a single failure doesn't result in catastrophe. The crash of Kenya Airways Flight 507. A key piece of evidence is quickly found, the 737's flight data recorder.
Well, looks pretty good, considering.
Technicians in Canada have been able to extract the FDR data. Any malfunction warnings during the flight would provide an important clue.
No warnings.
They find no signs of any system failure. As the team continues looking through the data,
but look at this.
They discovered that just over a minute into the flight, a different kind of alert did go off.
Bank angle alert at an altitude of 2,800 feet.
For investigators, this is their first real clue about what happened to Flight 507. Any roll exceeding 35 degrees is considered extreme. Once reaching that angle, a warning alerts pilots of danger.
Rotate.
When investigators review the pilot's inputs after takeoff, they make a critical discovery.
Get up.
Okay.
He was turning left from the moment they left the ground. And then he keeps making corrections to the left.
Looks like he's trying to keep the plane level.
But what caused the slow roll to the right in the first place?
Bingo. It's the way the flaps are rigged. Give it a slight right roll.
The flaps increase a plane's lift at slower speeds. On this particular airplane, the left flap provided slightly more lift than the right one. This discovery explains why the captain kept his control column turned to the left immediately after takeoff.
Well, that's weird.
But it doesn't explain an even more puzzling element of the flight data.
Look at this. The captain's control wheel inputs seem to stop. It's like he just let go of it. 6 degrees right, he does nothing. 11 degrees, 15 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, and still nothing.
As the plane's bank angle approached 35 degrees, neither pilot took action to stop the increasingly dangerous roll.
Bank angle, bank angle.
Allah! Until the bank angle warning sounded.
Bank angle.
And then he does this. Right, left, right again, left again.
Bank angle, bank angle.
The data paints a baffling picture of the 1.5-minute flight.
Who flies like that?
That was puzzling to us. So it really highlighted that we needed more information, needed more data, and that data is the CVR. The CVR is what tells us the conversation, what might they have been looking at.
But after weeks of searching the crash site, there's still no sign of the cockpit voice recorder. Japanese investigators call on Airbus for help.
Thanks for coming.
The French manufacturer sends a technical expert who knows the A300 inside and out.
I've been examining these instruments, but I'd like to get your take.
Confident that the plane's engines and wing flaps were not factors in the crash, investigators turn their attention to the cockpit instruments.
In any accident investigation, you want to document the cockpit, document the position of switches, any indicators that might show what the position was at impact.
They focus on the thrust levers.
The Goya Tower Dynasty going around.
Were the thrust levers in the right position to provide enough power for a go-around?
Forward position, right where we want it.
To investigators, it looks like they were. And it matches what the controller told them about Flight 140 requesting a go-around.
Roger, stand by for further instructions.
So the flight computer would have kicked in for the go-round mode.
Mm-hmm.
What investigators have uncovered so far is puzzling. It appears the plane was properly configured to perform a flawless go-around.
The flaps and slaps were set, the engines were at full power, everything was where it needed to be. So what went wrong?
The NTSB has hit an impasse in its investigation into the Fine Air crash. The mystery of Flight 101 has only deepened. But then, the investigation gets a break.
Benson.
An informant calls with a guilty conscience.
Who is this?
Okay, I'm listening.
He won't disclose his identity, but the caller reveals there's extra weight on the plane that the investigators are overlooking.
Their figures don't include the pallet or the netting.
The investigators now calculate the weight of the cargo, including pallets and netting. It's more than 5,000 pounds of extra weight.
Now we're getting somewhere.
The added weight could have had an effect on the plane's balance. The NTSB investigators think Fine Air Flight 101 crashed because it was overweight. So they want to test their theory in a flight simulator.
Okay, we're good to go.
5,000 extra pounds have been added to reflect the true weight and balance of the aircraft. To Benson's amazement, the plane lifts off without a problem. It rises in a stable climb.
Damn.
The pilots themselves were able to fly out of this situation. And we scratched our heads a bit.
What am I missing?
Benson's team needs to dig deeper if they hope to understand why the flight went so horribly wrong. With pressure mounting, the investigators dig into their work. They hope the flight recorders will help them understand why Lamia 2933 didn't make it to the airport.
Take these black boxes to the lab.
Both the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder appear to be in good shape. But they'll have to be sent to a lab to be processed before investigators can analyze them. While the flight recorders are being analyzed, investigators summon the last person to speak with the crew of Lamia 2933, air traffic controller.
Thank you for meeting with me.
It's been a very difficult time.
Tell me what happened before they declared the emergency. Were there other planes on hold?
Yes, 3. See, they were in a holding pattern right when Lamia radioed.
What did you do when they told you they had a fuel emergency?
But that's the crazy thing. They only told me that they had a fuel emergency right before they crashed, with no warning.
The crew's delay in informing her put Melina in a tough situation. The investigators need to know how she handled it. To find out, they turned to the air traffic control tapes, which recorded the final 18 minutes of communication between Melina and the crew.
Okay, let's start.
Renegro 2933, good evening.
Lamia 2933 control, good evening.
Lamia 2933, request priority for approach. We have a fuel problem.
Even after reporting a fuel problem, the crew doesn't give Melina any cause for concern.
Okay, understand you are requesting priority for landing also with the fuel problem, correct?
Affirmative.
How long until you need to start your approach, 2933?
Only when Melina checks in with them does the crew finally speak up.
We have a fuel emergency. That's why I'm asking you at once for final approach. Requesting immediate descent.
Pause. They declare a fuel emergency 7 minutes after entering the holding pattern. Why wait so long? Then they turn left here, towards the runway.
Turning left puts Flight 2933 in the direct path of other planes in the holding pattern.
Keep going.
Lamia 2933, make a right turn now to begin your descent.
Negative. We're already starting to descend. I'm heading for the runway.
Moments later, the crew reports the plane has lost power.
2933, total electrical failure, without fuel.
Stop. They didn't explain the situation until it was too late.
There's nothing she could have done.
The investigators conclude Melina did what she could to help Lamia 2933 in those stressful moments before the crash. But the recordings raise another question.
Here's what I don't get. The fuel warning should have gone off long before the start of the approach. But they don't declare an emergency until here.
Did the plane's fuel warning system malfunction? Or is there another reason for the crash that they'll need to explore? It's been almost 48 hours since Thai Airways Flight 311 disappeared in the Himalayas. Investigators have yet to find the aircraft. But now they're about to get an important break. Local villagers report that they found aircraft debris north of Kathmandu. The reported crash site is nowhere near the area they've been searching.
I don't think they ever, in their wildest imagination, thought the airplane was north of the airport.
North of Kathmandu, near the border with Tibet, the Himalayan peaks soar to an altitude of 20,000 feet. These northern summits are the reason almost all planes approach Tribhuvan Airport from the south, where the mountains are closer to 8,000 feet. Later that day, 27 miles north of Kathmandu, search crews find the remains of Thai Airways Flight 311. The point of impact is a steep rock face more than 11,000 feet up the side of a remote mountain. None of the 113 people on board have survived. The challenge for investigators is unlike anything they've encountered before. The terrain is so extreme, helicopters can't land near the impact zone. The team will have to trek more than 3,000 feet up from the base camp to reach the wreckage. It's a treacherous 5-hour hike. The team includes experts from around the world, including Canada's David Rohrer.
The level of destruction was enormous. You couldn't tell that you had an Airbus A310 aircraft there. I mean, you couldn't even tell you had 2 engines.
The first big question they have is, how did Thai Airways Flight 311 end up here? The Airbus should never have been flying north of the airport.
Right over there.
An airport hangar in Kathmandu is the final stop on a long journey for wreckage collected from the mountainside.
The Sherpas would bring down the pieces that we identified down to the landing zone. Then the Nepalese army and their helicopters would put them in nets and then sling them down to the hangar at the airport.
As team members comb through the wreckage, the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
Excuse me. Can I help you?
During the investigation, one of the family members was asking for a circuit board just because they somehow would link them to their loved one.
The unusual request leads to an incredible find.
That's when we actually found the internal mechanism of the recorder we were missing, which was quite amazing.
The FDR should provide crucial data on the plane's speed, direction, and altitude throughout the flight.
You always hope that luck is on your side, that things will happen to your benefit, and those are the kind of moments you really hope for as an investigator.
It's the breakthrough they've been waiting for. Evidence that could reveal how a plane flying south of the airport ended up slamming into mountains to its north.